I'm Stephanie Smith, CEO of Cogwell Marketing Analytics, and today we're going to be talking about maximizing your spa's online presence. So I think as spa directors and spa operators, we're in this place where we struggle balancing how much time do we spend on operations versus how much time do we spend on our marketing. We're also a lot of times have little to no marketing budget. When we do have budget, we don't know what to do with it. So if any of this speaks to you, hopefully we'll be able to address some of these things and give you more tools in your toolbox so that you're able to make a plan and actually action plan against that. So before we get into it, I usually like to start with some data. So where do we sit with spa demand? So I pulled up a simple graph that shows historically since basically early 2020, looking at 5 years of history to say how often are people searching for terms like massage near me and spa near me. So this is a free tool. Google Trends is a free tool that anybody can use. So you can really understand maybe if your market differs from some of these trends. But you'll see here that there was definitely a lull, obviously with when COVID first hit, but then there was a peak like towards the end of 2020 and into early 2021, where people really were searching a lot for some of these terms. So obviously there was a wellness that needed to happen after everyone got out of early COVID. So we're still, when we look at 2024 and as we go into 2025, that demand is still a little bit down from that peak, but we still see, at least throughout the year, pretty consistent. So again, if this is something you want to do for your own market and look for, downtown spas near me, downtown Dallas spas near me, that's something you can do. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, this platform also tells you tells you if there's some new terms that might be trending in the market. So there were a lot of head therapy and head spa variations that have seen a really big uptick recently. Related to that same head spa and head therapy were scalp massages. So it might be something if that's, you're looking to add more services to your spa. There's also storm simulator, which I had to Google, and that seemed to be something that might have went viral on TikTok. Might check that out. And then there's also different types of massages that people are looking for specifically. But that also, once you drill down, that's definitely a market by market scenario. The other data point I want to start out with is just looking at growth projection. So when you look at how some of the different services are trending since 2021, and this is forecasted through 2032, excuse me. Definitely you'll see that there's massage therapies, body scrubs and wraps, facial treatments, and then medical and cosmetic procedures all definitely are trending in the right direction. So you're in a business that has plenty of demand, so that should make you feel better, about your future growth potential. So today we're going to go through basically allowing you to create your own marketing plan. So I'm going to go through 5 different steps that really break it down so that you can create that action plan and feel like you can walk out of here with a playbook and what you want to do. So first we're going to start out with audience segmentation. So this is just really understanding. I know there are a lot of people that either work at individual spas or may work at a spa that's sitting at a hotel. So we want to try to make sure we address the dynamics of having both of those. So we work with quite a few spas, generally as they relate to hotels, but the hardest thing we struggle with is gathering the data. What data do we have access to? How can we create a plan to identify gaps if we don't know what the gaps are? So we really need to make sure that, what data can you get out of your reservation system? What data can you get out of your technology? Anything that you can gather out of your CRM, any of the tech stack that you use, really start to say, what is it can I do to gather data so I can start making the best decisions possible? So when we start looking at, once we have that data and we start to say, okay, before we can dive into strategy, before we can dive into how to spend money, before we can do any of that and hitting the go button on campaigns, this is what we need to do first. So first we're going to define who you are. And that's really seems like it should be really easy, but it's actually something that's actually hard for people to put into words. And that really is going to be a red thread that we need to pull through some of the other strategies that we implement. We also need to know our audience. So Obviously, it's a lot more cost effective to maximize your current audience than it is to go after new customer acquisition. So we need to know the dynamics there. And we also need to set goals. So I think a lot of times when we talk about goal setting, people are like, oh, well, we need more revenue, or so they're too generic to actually be actionable. So we really need to understand specific goals. So let's dig into each one of those. So when we start talking about who you are, I'm going to make the assumption that there's probably more than one spa option in your market. So you're not the only one. So you obviously need to understand what makes you unique from the competitor. So you're unique because of the services that you offer. Are you unique because of certain geographic locations that you need to maximize? But really give some thought to what truly sets you apart from the comp set. Obviously there's a reviews component that can kind of help you. But to really have that strategic marketing plan, you need to understand what your differentiator is and use that as your North Star throughout all of the conversations that we'll have today. So I use this as an example of knowing who you are, because this was a review that was pulled from this was actually pulled from a hotel, but this kind of gives you the perspective. Like, one person thought it was super hip, great location, had so much fun stuff to say about it. And then you have another guest, same exact location, but a totally different perspective. And this really shows how if you're marketing to the wrong type of guest, whether that's your hotel, whether that's your spa, that you might have two totally different mindsets. So try not to be all things to all people when you're trying to understand who your target market are and how you differentiate from other spas. So we talked about gathering the data. So what I'm really looking for, if we're trying to set those goals, is, who are your current clients? So when you start talking about key segments, you really want to understand who your current client base is, how old they are, where do they live? If you are a hotel spa, are you getting most of your current business from hotel guests or from local market? What does that mix look like? You also really want to understand the mix of your products and services. So, are there certain utilizations that happen with certain services? Is it, are you trying to build on a specific service? Is there specific days of the week that certain services sell out, or certain offerings? So really understanding the patterns that you happen to see week over week, month over month, season over season. So the other thing to really understand when you start talking about your audience is, what is it that specific person or audience might be looking for? So if you're a spa within a hotel and you're going after hotel guests, they're going to have, different limitations or different things that they might be looking for. There's also, the component of price sensitivity, right? So as we start talking about pricing, and I think there's a lot of people that want to stay away from the discounting, we really have to understand who that guest is. Is it a value guest? What is it, their expectations? What is it they're actually looking for? So really understanding the balance between those segments, where that overlap is, because when you tie in who you are and that guest, and making sure that you have alignment in terms of expectations of what you offer and what they actually might be looking for. So once you've gathered the data, once you know who you currently have coming and what your gaps are, then you can start to set realistic goals. So this should really, really be specific. So I put down a couple of examples that you might want to have from a goal standpoint. Obviously, this is, an example of some of the ones that we've set with spas before, but you might look at this and be like, yeah, I'd like to see all of that, but don't bite off more than you can chew, because I think you're going to be setting yourself up for failure. So really hone in on, say, what's the biggest gap that we have, and then what time frame are we trying to achieve that? So I think a lot of people go into panic mode, and hotels do this too. So it might be middle of the month, middle of February, and you say, oh my goodness, like, we're really behind pace for February, and everyone sets their hair on fire and thinks, what can I do? But really, any type of strategies and goals that you set, set them in terms of short-term goals and long-term goals. So you're never going to meet your long-term goals if you don't have the short-term goals to supplement it, and have those different kind of toll gates that you need to meet before you get there. So the next component that we want to look at when we're developing our full marketing plan is looking at the shopping behavior. So this is just aligning your marketing with customer purchase preferences. So I think for us, if we're looking at it from a marketing lens, we need to be ready when the guest is ready to make a purchase. A lot of times we hyper focus on the transactional piece, like getting them to make that spa reservation, when a lot of the research and the thought process in terms of just getting them excited about the services that you offer need to happen well before that transaction phase. So really look at that whole customer journey when we look at what happens before the point of transaction or what happens before the point of actually making a reservation. So in the B2B world, when we start talking about marketing, there's a stat that a lot of people throw around that says only 5% of people are actually in buying mode. 95% of people are, consuming content up until that point. So we want to also make sure we're marketing to that 95%, not only the 5%. So I'll put together a couple of different patterns depending on, as we kind of go back to that previous understanding that target guest, what your current clients are, who your future clients might be. So here's like a particular pattern that you might see if you are a spa within a hotel in terms of how they might think about when to book a spa, when you need to start marketing to them, maybe before they even come on site. I think we always want to think if I do A, then B will happen, but it's not always that direct linear experience when it comes to, booking a spa experience. So when we look at some of the other potential patterns, this might be, through the whole trip planning journey that might happen with the hotel, you'll see that it might not always happen in a one-to-one manner. And we need to say, where is it that we're trying to insert our spa experience? Where is it that we need to get them thinking about it? Again, before they actually get to the actual hotel. And then there's also just whether this is a hotel spa or freestanding spa, it's about understanding, how to fill in those last minute holes, how to fill in last minute cancellations. So this a lot of times is where you want to lean on more of your locals. If you're a freestanding spa, leaning on some of your current clients that might have that flexibility. So depending on, again, whether they're current or new guests, these are kind of some of the different buying patterns that we might want to align with. So again, it happens in hotels too. We think, oh, well, somebody wants a massage. They're immediately going to make that reservation, and we want to be there when they make that reservation, but it just doesn't really happen like that. So you have to go back to the questions we asked about knowing your audience, knowing the segments, and then understanding their why, because different people are going to, be ready to make that transaction at different times. So one of the other things we look at in terms of once we understand who we're going after is really aligning our offerings with the market demand. So once you have that data and you understand what your gaps are, you really need to say, was it those gaps that we're trying to fill? So we look at the calendar. I know a lot of spas struggle with like those early morning appointments, or there might be certain days of the week that they're going to struggle getting appointment times. So how are we going to make sure that we are, filling those specific gaps based on those patterns that we have already identified? So another piece of this, and this is something that I know some of our clients struggle with, is that pricing and promotion dynamic. And I'm not a pricing expert. I know that when I think about like hotel and air pricing, and there's a pricing perspective in it, there's a lot that goes into how to price, but I think a lot of spas tend to use a flat price all the time, and then they look to use maybe some sort of discounting during certain things. So really understanding the psyche of that is a complicated and almost a science. But if you do have a last minute cancellation in the day for the day, like how do we use some of the technology to help sell those? I also like to look at, some different ways of talking about, incentives, maybe is a better term than using discounts. Um, but once we understand different ways to promote those different offerings or maybe promotions, again, going back to that goal alignment and that you have already set, I think there's a way to do that strategically without and still keeping your profit in place. But I guess word to the wind, when we start looking at learning from other people's mistakes. I'm sure if you've used apps like Uber or Lyft, they have what's called surge pricing, which means you pay a higher price when the demand is high, right? And I think, we do that with yield pricing in hotels. But if you read the case study that Wendy's did, they tried to charge more for high demand periods, and they got a massive amount of backlash from that, even though the thought process that car rentals and hotels and even airlines use is very similar. I think that they just, from a marketing standpoint, use some of the wrong verbiage and just really rub people the wrong way. But I think there's a lot of people are like, oh, do I feel like I have to discount if I want those early morning business? But that's again waiting until that point of transaction to market to those people. So how do you get that steady flow of awareness and people interested in your product so you're not scrambling to fill those last minute holes? So because I also see it in hotels, like if we're offering a discount all day on Tuesday, did we actually have a trade down effect? Would they have paid full price and we just offer them a discount for no reason? So we need to really focus on who is seeing information about our hotels and when, and really understanding the value guest and making sure that value guests who would not have stayed, not use our services otherwise, and only, offering them discounts if we think they wouldn't have bought otherwise. So when we start talking about, discounts or promos, I did have a case study that I wanted to share from one of our clients. So they identified like Tuesday all day and specifically Friday at 4 to 6. They were 4 to 6. There were gaps that they could not fill. And they were trying to go from a 5-day opening to a 6-day opening. So they were just struggling with that expansion. And they also were just interested in kind of doing a community offering, like a give back. So what we did was a teacher appreciation. So they were able to identify that they didn't have a lot of teachers as their current base. So they did offer a discount, but only during certain periods. And then they also they implemented Dynamics Flex pricing on Tuesday evening. So it was really just that kind of those specific gaps that they were focused on. So it really helped push them, in a short time. And it was one of those, the teachers are, definitely have a word of mouth that really helped spread that from a marketing standpoint. We didn't have to put a ton of money around it, but we were able to really gain some new recurring customers that we didn't have before, and identified, and was able to streamline some of our service offerings, because there were certain specific offerings that they were interested in that we were able to complement with some of the other services we offered. One of the other case studies, this was for actually the Ritz-Carlton and in Lake Tahoe. So super seasonal business when it comes to Lake Tahoe, if anybody's ever been there. So they took a little bit of different approach to going after, they also were kind of going after locals to help supplement that. But their other thing was also one of their other goals was really trying to capture more email addresses. So while they did get a discount, we were able to incorporate blackouts, and we were also trying to increase total stay, so giving them a discount at our restaurants as well. So in addition to the spa play, we were actually able to get incremental revenue business, but we were able to get about 1,600 new email addresses in addition to the increase in spa appointments. So we were able to continually use that database, that opt-in database, to market other aspects of the hotel to the local market as well. So the third piece of this, a lot of this has been just kind of laying the groundwork. So now we really need to get into boosting visibility. So I always like to say you must be present to win. So this just means, there's a lot of advertising coming at people from all different places. So we really need to think about, if we want them to actually book a service, we have to make sure that we're taking up space as they consume other parts of digital. So if they don't know you exist, they can't make a reservation. It's really as simple as that. So I like to divide this into 3 different categories. So we got to make sure that we're activating in all the places that people that might be booking spa appointments can find you. And then we need to design content around that target market so that when it's time to actually make the reservation, that you're the one that's chosen from all the different listings that they can find. And then there's a build loyalty component. So again, how do we keep them coming back for more? How do we use them to get more business from them as individuals? So dividing this into be found and be chosen, we'll first kind of go with the be found, because this is the lift that has to happen, cleaning up the local listings, making sure that you are where that guest chooses to search for. So you can't make an assumption that everyone knows that you exist. We can't make an assumption that they know what your services are, they know what your pricing is if they've never been there. So as we break that down, one of the key aspects across all those different listings that were listed is what us in the marketing world call UNAP or NAPW. It's just an acronym that says, let's make sure we're consistently promoting our own website URL. And I think a lot of times with spas, like sometimes the menu sits on a different URL or a third-party platform that's different than our actual website, which I think sometimes is confusing to guests. We also want to have the same name. So if you're a hotel spa, like do you have your own hotel spa name at XYZ Resort? Or do you have a freestanding name? Like how are you leveraging the hotel's exposure in addition to your name, and then using that name consistently throughout different places? Address and phone number, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. But we do need I think the name and the URL are the biggest inconsistencies I see, whether I'm looking at Google, looking at Bing, looking at TripAdvisor, those type things. So, the number one, if you take nothing else from any of these slides, and you only do one thing at the end of this presentation, I'd really go and look at your Google My Business listing. Make sure you own it. Make sure that you've filled out every possible thing that you can possibly fill out. I've seen night and day differences, like having people actually push their Google reviews has a direct incremental effect on how many other people see that Google My Business listing review. And if you are a spa at an actual hotel, you should have your own listing and have it tied into, like in the screenshot here, and have it nestled into the hotel listing. Having both of those separate profiles, it's completely free, but having them linked is really, really important. So same kind of connected to Google My Business, but there's a lot of different GPS sources, whether it's, Uber and Lyft or Bing Maps. There's actually a lot of backend places that feed a lot of these GPS sources. So I would say go and just when you're far away, try to put your spa's location into one of those apps and see if it navigates there properly. I'm not suggesting that a lot of people are necessarily going to Uber or Lyft to your location. What we're trying to understand is because Uber and Lyft might use different GPS sources, we want to make sure that you're easily find, that there's no discrepancies in your address or location, and that they're actually able to, consistently know that your location exists on all different maps. Another part of kind of being found, obviously you want to show up in kind of that map ranking if somebody does Google searches, but sometimes in a really, really competitive environment, and this happens in hotels too, we say, look, we need to make sure we have exposure on page 1. Nobody cares about page 2. So if I can't be one of the top 3 maps listings right now, maybe if I look and say if there's any other local blogs or local industry sites, and you want to say, let me click on those and see if my spa is listed at top of those, because again, people are going to find out about you from different ways. So we got to make sure that you can get listed on some local, thinking about your Convention Visitors Bureau, your Chamber of Commerce. that usually are in all markets. How do we make sure we get on those as well? So now that you've done the basics and you made sure that you've gotten yourself listed on all those different local listing sites, now we need to look at how do we make sure that if they're comparing you against another spa, that you're the actual one that's chosen. So this goes back to understanding your differentiators. So the first thing we talked about, why is you as a spa? So, are your offerings clear and consistent? And sometimes we look at our own website, we look at that list, and it's really hard to say, look at that from a different perspective. So maybe while you're here with other people, sitting in the audience, maybe you have them take a look at yours and do kind of a little mini audit. And also, just make sure everything's really clear. And easy to book. So easy to book is relative depending on the tech stack that you have in place. But it's funny, I just visited a full service hotel spa in Canada like 3 weeks ago. And I ended up having like an extra 2 hours free. So I was going to go and make a massage appointment. And the hotel website had their hours one way, and then there was a separate spa website that had the separate hours, and neither one of them allowed me to book same day. So I ended up trying to call the spa. No one answered. So then I called the front desk. I was like, are they even open? Is somebody going to call me back? They were like, leave a message. Then I leave a message, wait for someone to call me back. So the process almost made me not book the appointment because I was getting so much differentiating information online, and the ease of book for last minute just wasn't there. There was no text, there was no chat. So I was really struggling, and I just had to roll the dice and hope someone called me back, which they did, but it just might be something to kind of think about. So I think this goes without saying, but you really need good video, good content in terms of photos and imagery. So this is always something people wait, I think, too long because they're either waiting for a professional photographer, they don't have the money for a professional photographer. So I think the two ways around that is one, just take some with your phone. You can always upgrade later, but having no or few pictures is worse than having, maybe some that aren't as professional. The other piece of that is like leveraging your current guest. So when you have a bachelorette party and you ask them, be like, hey, is that something that I can use for my Google My Business page or my website? But being able to, have people see how they might utilize that in a group or incentive environment is pretty key. And even take pictures of your little amenities. Like, I love when there's, flavored water or flavored teas. And that's something that they offer. So even little pictures like that show the little nice touches, your amenities or scents that you might pipe through, anything like that. Or if you have, access to hair dryers and curling irons afterwards, like being able to showcase that you have those type of amenities, I think is important to show because nobody actually reads. So kind of going back to the Google My Business piece, as I mentioned, how important those reviews are. So reviews hold a 17% ranking factor in your search results. So think about if my spa has 50 reviews and they're super sporadic, and maybe one of my competitor hotels has 400 reviews and they're consistently getting, a couple reviews a week, their listing is by default going to show up more than yours. And that's just, playing into the algorithm. So as we talk more about reviews, I think that we tend to get hung up on, oh, this person said something and they didn't understand, blah, blah, blah. So we need to be really understanding of the reflective impact that reviews have. So people's perception becomes your reality. What people are saying about you, whether you believe it or not, is what they believe. So is that because you didn't communicate with them properly in advance? Is it because your booking process isn't as streamlined as it can be? But these are opportunities, if you do get any bad ones, that you need to really focus on. And like I said before, you really need to ask people for reviews because they're not going to usually leave it on their own accord. You really have to ask. I don't recommend offering an incentive for that, because you could get in trouble if you're offering points or things like that. Depending on the website, you might get in trouble. So just be careful with that, but focusing on, some other way to incentivize people to leave a review. Um, so when we start talking about making the marketing investment, if you know you have gaps and you need to market to fill in some of those gaps, even in the short term, um, I think we never have a large enough budget to do what we want to. Same in hotels. I mean, if give me all the money in the world and I would find a way to spend it. So I really say to start slow. If you're not doing a lot of marketing right now, you don't need a lot of money to start to really do these mini tests to say, okay, how do I try to reach the goals that I established in the beginning? And where do I start and how do I go from here? So I tried to put some of the more traditional media channels here. And I really number these because I feel like if you don't have much money, you've got to start somewhere. And I try to put them in kind of progressive order to make sure that you're, maximizing your dollar, however small or big that budget might be. So when we look at, social, easiest, definitely first and foremost. I think sometimes we put out content and people aren't seeing it, so there usually does need to be a pay to play, but it doesn't have to be a lot of money. There's really great targeting within Meta, almost, probably better than Google. When you start, you can target by location, you can target by interest. There's a lot of other parameters in there that you can really get niche and say, once I've defined who my target audience is, how do I get in front of them in a way that works for them? So I would say you could start with as little as $100 a month to run those test campaigns, $50 here, $50 there, and just see what type of traction that you get. And I always say start with one platform first. So, Facebook and Instagram are going to be the easiest. The advertising platforms are linked. Facebook, maybe for an older audience, if I had to be stereotypical, and Instagram for a younger one. I think TikTok is a lot to really maximize TikTok. You almost need to be posting videos daily, which is a hard thing for a lot of people to do. They just, understanding that time suck that it potentially can be. The other thing from a social standpoint, again, like I mentioned with the photos, or like asking guests permission to share their content or getting them to tag you, like they're putting out the content, they're doing some of the marketing for you. So how can you kind of partner with them and jump on that bandwagon is really huge to get them to do a lot of the content generation for you. So if you and we've written a blog that talks about how to run your own social media ads. And this is separate from boosting. A lot of people will use boosting, but if you're not leveraging the power of the targeting, you're probably not going to get the same results. So we have you want to scan this QR code. This kind of gives you a step by step if you're working on super shoestring budget, you're not able to hire an agency. So the next tier, after you've kind of played a social and you're getting a decent budget, I would say it's time to get into more the Google Play. So this is separate than your organic search engine optimization, but the two should ideally go hand in hand. But a lot of times you can kind of do those near me, maximize those near me type searches if people are already in your local market. So I've just put a couple examples on there and how it really shows up on Google, and a couple of examples of some stuff that I've seen. So this is going to be a little bit more expensive than social. Your cost per click is going to be probably 50 cents to $1.50 per click. So if you can get a budget of around $500, I think it's a little bit harder to run your own Google campaigns. And you might need some third-party assistance, but it's good for those quick wins. For people that are already in market, and what I mean by in market is they're actually shopping and they're really they're much closer to making that transaction. So if you really have capitalized on both of those two, I would say look at your display and programmatic. So think about this is where the technology is really, really kind of scary. So based on this cell phone that I carry with me everywhere and I never leave it at home, right? My cell phone is knows the targeting within the SIM card knows, when I went to Target, how much time I spent at Target, using the apps on here, it knows when I logged into my Amazon app, what I bought on my Amazon app. So I might not know, Stephanie Smith did all this, but using all the information, this cell phone technology, we can start building audiences and saying, who do I want to get in front of? So if you've identified, you know, that, there's I don't know, a park or a gym that might align with your target audience, you could actually target people that regularly visit one of those facilities based on that geo-targeting within the cell phones. Kind of creepy, right? But this is more the way that those ads show up. If you ever, are looking on a website and you see kind of maybe think about a recipe site and you see a random ad for something, you're like, oh, I was just thinking about that. So it's really about understanding what you look for and showing those ads up there. So this is going to be a little bit more costly, but in terms of generating awareness, I think it's pretty unique. I usually suggest is for any type of new opening. So if you've got a brand new spa, you've kind of got to get as much information, get as many people familiar with your brand as possible, and this is a good place to start. The other side of that, from a most of those three were about getting in front of new customer targets. So if we have our existing followers that we're trying to nurture, there's obviously the pre-marketing campaign. And so this is, again, kind of those stalker ads that you can set up. So if somebody visits your website, you can keep sending them ads to keep coming back. There's also drip emails. So again, I used to be a member at a spa outside of Boston, and they would send me an email on Mondays and be like, here's some open slots that we have for the month. I've seen some spas that will send you a text and say, hey, we've got a cancellation for today. Do you want it? Those type things are really good to fill those last minute holes with your existing clientele. So the last piece of this is really looking at collaborating. So this is community collaboration. If you're within a hotel, understanding that hotel collaboration and really trying to tie it all together and maximizing relationships that you might have. So in the hotel space, we look at the strategic balance of marketing, sales, and revenue management. Obviously, if you're a freestanding spa, you're not going to have the same necessarily dynamics. I think a lot of freestanding spas do have kind of a sales team, but in the hotel world, if you're over here in spa, you really need to try to see how to get in front of this commercial strategy trifecta. So I think a lot of hotels and hopefully freestanding spas, you have some type of agency partner in play. So going back to the being found and being chosen, how do we make sure that we're maximizing? So I think there's either, are you doing it yourself or are you having somebody else doing it? So it's about asking the right questions with those partnerships. So going back to them and saying, hey, like, this is what I'm trying to get my hands around. How can you help me? Which of these things can you help me with if you already have that agency partnership in place? So when we start looking at, spa specific distribution partnerships, I think just like with hotels, there's kind of this hesitation, like, do I really want, Expedia or Booking.com in the hotel space to own that relationship? And I think sometimes there's a hesitancy there. But I listed a couple of the partnerships that some of our spas have worked with in the past. I'm sure everyone knows about a couple of these. I will point out that something unique that we found out through Spa Founder is once you decide to participate in their gift card program, that they have a distribution through Costco. So from a local standpoint, that was really able to help us get some reach that we couldn't have got for our hotels otherwise. And then Resort Pass, I think a lot of hotels are probably familiar with the Resort Pass because they might sell a day pass to the pool. But I think there's some unique opportunities with spas. Like if you have like a sauna or a steam room or something like that, how can you offer day passes to those? Because that's not gonna hurt your labor cost. It's not gonna be any extra money basically for you to offer those passes. At least from a labor standpoint, on websites like that. And then if you're looking at it from a total like experiences standpoint, with spa being just one of the experiences, if you're at a hotel or you have a really big spa that has a lot to offer. I think Waco is doing some really cool things that you might take a look at. If you're just kind of a massage shop, you're probably not going to you're probably not going to see value there, but I think there's a way to really focus on the, higher end guests that are looking for experiences, with Waco. Um, Again, as we talk about with the agency partnerships, these are kind of the things that you want to collaborate on. So it has to be a two-way street in terms of gathering the data, getting them the data, so that they can maybe help you with some of this stuff. So whether it's, CRM or email marketing that they can help you on, or some of the different page strategies we talked about today, or even listings management, I think they can all help there. And if you already have an agency in place, or if your hotel has an agency and you're just trying to kind of piggyback on what the hotel is already doing, I think sometimes we just have to be able to ask the right questions to be able to get the right answers. So I'll listed a couple of questions right here. And again, coming from an agency owner, these are questions, that I'm happy to answer, but I don't know if we're always that forthcoming in giving that information off the top. But if we know what your goals are, and we're able to understand, the data that you're working with and the gaps that you have, we can usually build a plan against that. So as we kind of take all this and put it together, we've kind of went through, from top to bottom funnel, how do we create that marketing plan? Some of this was definitely free. Some of this you might, need a little bit of budget to start activating on. But I did try to create kind of an action plan. So if you are trying to identify where to start, I kind of put together a little checklist here, going from the top of the funnel all the way to the bottom, starting with, why your spa, and then hopefully be able to tie those red threads together, for that full collaborative, marketing plan. So thank you again for having me. I'm the CEO, Stephanie Smith, the CEO at Cogwell Marketing and Analytics. If you want to check out our website, I have a little QR code there as well. And everybody's welcome to this presentation deck if it's something that's helpful to you afterwards. So thanks so much.